They say the first cut is the deepest. It's a lie. The first cut is clean, surgical. You hardly feel it through the adrenaline, the purpose, the certainty of your cause. It's the 10,000 cuts that come after that flay you alive. The little betrayals that compound. The slow, sickening realization that you are not the surgeon, but the tissue being dissected. My name was Gereon Varlok. I bore the grey ceramite of the lunar wolves, then the sea green of the Sons of Horus. I stood in the inner circle. I wore the Eye of Horus not as a symbol, but as a second skin. I was a warrior of the first company, and in the days before the fall, I stood guard at the very door to the Warmaster's private chambers. I heard the whispers before they became roars. I saw the shadows gather before they swallowed the light, and I did nothing to understand how a legion falls. You must first understand how it stands at its zenith. We were not just the 16th Legion. We were the tip of the spear, the favored sons, where the Emperor's own custodians were shackled to a corpse on a throne. We were the living will of the Great Crusade, and Horus was its beating heart. To be a son of Horus was to walk in the reflected glory of a demigod who called you brother. It was an intoxication more potent than any combat sin I am. The change did not come from outside. It grew within the house, like rot in a magnificent timber. It began not with a demon's whisper, but with a father's silence. You must understand terror. To us, it was a myth, a faded portrait at the end of a long, dusty corridor. Our father was Horus. He was the one who lifted us up after a failed assault, who laughed with us in victory, who knew the name of every captain in the Legion. The Emperor was a distant, cold star, a bureaucrat god who had built the machine and then retired to his palace, leaving his finest son to do the real work of running the galaxy. The first seed was planted on Davin. I was not in the temple. I stood guard outside, amidst the humid, clinging fog of that cursed moon. The Warmaster went in whole, our luminous commander, the best of us all. He came out, less paler, drained. We were told it was a poison, a Xenos toxin. We believed it. We would have believed anything the apothecaries and the mournful, whispering chaplain Erebus told us. He was our father. He was sick, but in the days that followed, as he convalesced in the vengeful spirit's Medicaid decks, the atmosphere on the flagship shifted. It became a sick room, and sick rooms breed whispers. The Legion's upper echelons, the Mournival Phorix, Abaddon, the inner cabal clustered like worried physicians, and their diagnosis, fed to us in hints and implications, was a virus called ingratitude. The talk began of the Emperor's withdrawal, of the taxes of tides bleeding the crusade dry to feed a stagnant terror of the new. Soulless bureaucrats, the High Lords being groomed to replace the Primarchs once the fighting was done. We, the rank and file, absorbed this, not as rebellion, but as a veteran's righteous grievance. Our father had been wronged. We were his sword and his shield. It was our duty to protect him, even from the neglect of his father. The first cut, the Warmaster recovered, but he was changed. The warmth was still there, but it had a new, sharp edge. His strategic genius, once directed outward at the enemies of mankind, now turned inward, examining the Imperium itself with a critic's cold eye. His speeches to the Legion took on a new tone. He spoke of legacy, of the crusade being stolen from its true architects, of the need to secure a future worthy of the blood we had spilled. He didn't say rebel, he said reclaim. He didn't say disobey, he said correct the course. And we, the loyal sons, nodded. This wasn't treachery. This was a course correction. A necessary adjustment to a great machine that had slipped its alignment. We were the technicians, sworn to the machine's purpose, not to its distant absentee maker. The next cut came faster. The secret councils, the closed-door meetings with representatives from other legions, the ambitious Fulgrim, the brooding Mortarion, the ever-plotting Magnus, the gradual, systematic isolation of those within our own ranks whose loyalty to the Emperor might outweigh their loyalty to Horus. Captain Tarik Torgadon's jokes grew darker, more barbed. Captain Garviel Loken's thoughtful silences became longer, more profound. They were not ostracized, not at first. They were simply edged out of the new, tightening circle of truth. I witnessed one such edging. I was on duty outside the Strategium when First Captain Abadan emerged, his face a storm cloud. He nearly collided with Loken, who was approaching with a data slate. Garviel, Abadan said, his voice a low growl. The Warmaster is in council. He cannot be disturbed. This is urgent as a compliance reports from the Aurelian subsector. Nothing is more urgent than the future of the Legion, Abadan snapped. Leave it with the Warmaster will review it. In time, the look that passed between them was not one of brotherhood, but of two predators sizing each other up. Loken surrendered the slate, but his eyes held a question. Abadan refused to answer. Loken turned and walked away, his shoulders a fraction stiffer than before. A loyal son gently pushed from the hearth. Another cut, then came the mustering at Isstvan. The order to purge a rebellious world, a stronghold of a deluded, emperor-worshipping cult. A straightforward compliance action. We assembled in strength, a show of force to remind the galaxy of the Warmaster's might. But the force was layered. The lunar wolves were the anvil, but the hammer, the world eaters, the Emperor's children, the Death Guard. I remember the muster on the parade decks of the Spirit. The legions stood together, a breathtaking spectacle of imperial might. But the air crackled with something foul. The World Eater's ranks seethed with a barely contained, directionless rage. The Emperor's children stood with an eerie, poised stillness that felt like the moment before a sadist strikes. The Death Guard were just grim, a resigned, terminal grimness. We Sons of Horus stood among them, the reasonable ones, the leaders. We told ourselves we were the stabilizing element, the sane men in a gathering storm. We were the conductors of the lightning. The drop was a masterpiece of Legion coordination. We made planetful, driving the rebels before us into the great basin of the Isstvan system's primary city. It was a textbook hammer. We were the anvil, holding the line. The other legions were the hammer, descending to crush the enemy against us. I was in the front line, bolter roaring, chainsword singing its metallic dirge. The enemy fought with the desperate strength of fanatics, but they were nothing before us. I felt the old, clean purpose of the crusade. This was war as it should be. Clear enemies, a righteous cause. Then the order crackled over the Vox. A general frequency from the Warmaster's own command channel. Sons of Horus, disengage and fall back to rally point Gamma. New targets designated. Cleanse the field. The code phrase, cleanse the field, was a standard protocol for mopping up residual resistance. We obeyed, disengaging with disciplined grace, pulling back to the preordained coordinates. We left the rebels reeling, confused by our retreat, from our new vantage. On the high ground overlooking the basin, we watched the hammer fall. But it did not fall on the rebels, the World Eaters, the Emperor's children, and the Death Guard turned their weapons not on the enemy fleeing before them, but on the legions who had dropped with them as allies. The Iron Hands, the Salamanders, the Raven Guard. I stood there, my bolter cooling in my hands, and watched the galaxy break. I saw Vulcan of the Salamanders, that noble, compassionate giant, surrounded by a shrieking tide of Emperor's children, their weapons carving not for efficiency, but for the beauty of the scream. I saw Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, locked in a duel with his own brother Fulgrim, a duel that was less a fight and more a violent, hateful sculpture. I saw Corax's Raven Guard, masters of stealth, being hunted and butchered in the open by the relentless, grinding advance of the Death Guard. This was not war. This was murder, fratricide, the most fundamental law of the Legiones. Astartes' brother does not raise his hand against brother was being shattered before my eyes, and my legion, was standing on the sidelines, holding the perimeter. We were not participants, we were witnesses. We were the crowd at an execution, ensuring no one interfered. The vox in my helmet was a chaos of screams, curses, and the dying rasp of betrayed battle brothers. But over it all, clear as a bell, came the Warmaster's voice, not on the general channel, on a secured Sons of Horus only frequency. My sons, what you witnessed is not treachery, but a necessity. The Imperium is sick. These legions are the cancer, loyal to the disease, not to the species. Today, we cut it out. We are the surgeons. Remember your oaths, to me, to the future, surgeons. That word again, the same word iteratus, Major Callus had used on another world, in another life, but Callus had spoken of transplanting organs of hope. Horus spoke of cutting out a cancer. And we, the proud lunar wolves, were now the sterile instruments in his hand. I looked to my left, to my right. My brothers in the Justaran. Their faces were hidden behind their helms, but I could see it in the set of their shoulders, in the white-knuckled grip on their weapons. A terrible, dawning stillness. This was the course correction. This was the reclamation. It was a charnel house. One of my squad, a veteran called Bale, spoke over our private link, his voice hollow. Varlok, the Raven Guard. They are trying to break north. Through the Chael Defile. The order is to seal it. I looked at the tactical readout on my retinal display. The Chael Defile was a narrow pass. A company of Raven Guard, shattered and bleeding, were trying to escape through it. My squad had been assigned to intercept, to seal their tomb. We have our orders, I heard myself say, the words ash in my mouth. We moved. We were sons of Horus. We obeyed. We reached the defile ahead of the fleeing Raven Guard. We took up positions amid the jagged rocks. I saw them come, a ragged, bleeding handful of black-armored warriors, carrying their wounded, fighting a rearguard action against the pursuing World Eaters. They fought with a silent, desperate dignity. They were not screaming hatred. They were fighting for survival. I raised my bolter. I sighted on the lead Raven Guard, a figure with a broken pauldron, gesturing his brothers forward. My finger rested on the trigger, and in that moment, I saw not an enemy, not a cancer. I saw Captain Loken being turned away from the strategium. I saw the old, clean purpose of the crusade on 100 worlds, now drowned in the basin below. I heard the Warmaster's voice, so reasonable, justifying the massacre of brothers. I was not a surgeon. I was a murderer, and the first life I was about to take in this new, hideous war was that of a loyal soldier, a hero of the Imperium, whose only crime was trusting the wrong brother. I did not pull the trigger. A bolter round roared from the rock to my left. It took the lead Raven Guard in the chest, throwing him back. Bale he had fired. The rest of my squad opened up, a storm of fire raking the defile. The Raven Guard scattered, some falling, others seeking futile cover. I stood there, my weapon silent, a statue amidst the storm. Bale glanced at me, his helmeted gaze a question mark. I said nothing. I couldn't. The massacre was brief. The Raven Guard were outnumbered, outgunned, exhausted. The World Eaters caught up from behind, and the defile became a butcher's yard. When the last black armor lay still, Bale clapped me on the shoulder. Shock of the new brother. It passes. We do what must be done. I nodded, a mechanical gesture. Inside, a chasm had opened. I had not fired, but by my inaction, by my presence, I was complicit. I had helped seal the tomb. The first cut I had felt, the clean, surgical cut of Davin, was now a festering, gangrenous wound. I was infected. We all were. The Isstvan atrocity was the end of the beginning. For the galaxy, it was the declaration of war. For me, for Gereon Varlok, it was the moment my soul went into exile. I continued to fight. I wore the sea. I followed orders. I killed for the Warmaster. I became a veteran of the heresy, my armor accumulating the scars of 100 battles fought for a cause. I now knew in my gut was rotten, but I was a ghost in that armor. Every battle was Isstvan. Every enemy was a brother betrayed. Every order from the Warmaster was the voice of the surgeon, asking me to make another cut. I fought not with the fervor of the believer, but with the cold, technical skill of the damned, hoping that one day, a bolt or a blade would find me and grant me the mercy of silence. That bolt never came. I survived. Through the burning of Prospero, through the Shadow War, through the long, bloody slog towards Terra. I survived to see the Warmaster's glorious reclamation become a siege of pure, unadulterated hatred. I survived to see the Father I had loved become a vessel for something so much older and darker, and on the eve of the siege itself, as the vengeful spirit translated into the soul system, I finally did the only thing left to me. I walked away, not in a blaze of defiant glory, not to join the loyalists. I simply left. During the chaos of final deployment, I sabotaged my own locator, jettisoned in an escape pod not towards Terra, but into the silent, empty void between the worlds. I was found, eventually, by a scavenger ship. I traded my power armor, piece by piece, for passage further into the void, away from the war. The ceramite that had been my skin, my identity, was bartered for anonymity. The eye of Horus I carved from my last remaining pauldron with a plasma cutter and hurled into a recycling furnace. I watched it melt, the symbol that had once meant everything curling into nothing. Now, I work in the engine rooms of this nameless freighter. The heat and the roar of the plasma drives drown out the memories. My hands are stained with grease, not blood. I am just another lost soul in a galaxy full of them. But sometimes, in the quiet between the engine pulses, I hear it. The roar of Isstvan, the screams in the Chael defile, the Warmaster's voice, so reasonable, so wrong. They say the heresy began with Horus's ambition, or with the machinations of chaos, or with the emperor's neglect. They are wrong. The heresy began the moment a soldier was given an order that severed his heart from his duty, and he obeyed it. It began with 10,000 small betrayals of conscience, committed by men who believed they were serving a higher truth. I am Gereon Varlok. I was a son of Horus. I helped murder the future. And the deepest cut of all is the one you never feel until it's too late, the cut that separates who you were from the monster you've become. That wound never heals. It just learns to bleed silently, forever. That silence in the engine room is a lie. The drives roar, but inside my head, the war is never over. It replays. Every night, in the dark, on my bunk, slick with sweat that isn't from the engine heat, I'm back there. Not as a memory, but as a prisoner. The mind has its own Geller field, and mine is failing. It's not the big battles that haunt me, not the void duels with the imperial fists, not the trench lines of beta. It's the small, personal fractures. The things you see when you're not looking at the grand strategy, but at the man next to you, like what happened to Sergeant Kesso. Kesso was a true believer, even after Isstvan. A zealot, he'd taken the Warmaster's surgeon analogy and made it a religion. Every world we purged of imperial loyalists was a tumor removed. Every city we burned was cauterization. He saw the growing mutations in the legion, the tusks sprouting from jawlines, the skin hardening like stone, the occasional uncontrolled fury not as corruption, but as evolution. The warp is just another tool, Varlok, he'd say, polishing a skull-shaped knuckle. The old man on Terra feared it. The Warmaster wields it. That's the difference between a custodian and a conqueror. We were on a compliance action now, an invasion of a loyalist forge world, Lyri 4. The order was to capture the primary plasma generatorum intact. It was a nest of fanatical tech adepts and skittery who fought with the mindless tenacity of machines. Kesso's squad was pinned down in a refinery trench by a walking artillery piece. They called an onager Dunacrola. I was leading the relief push. By the time we blasted through the skittery lines, it was over. The Dunacrola was a molten wreck, but Kesso was standing over the twitching remains of the skittery Alpha, a biomechanical thing of pistons and raw meat. He wasn't just killing it, he was disassembling it. His power fist tore into its chassis, not with strategic intent, but with a kind of rapturous surgical curiosity. He was pulling out bundles of wires, snapping hydraulic lines, muttering to himself, fascinating. See the neural linkage here? Direct feed from the cortex. No pain inhibitors. Pure combat efficiency. Flawed though. A single point of failure here, at the base of the spine replacement. Kesso, I voxed. The generator. We have to move. He didn't hear me. He'd ripped the Alpha's cranial unit free and was turning it over in his hands, staring into its dead, red optic sensors. So much potential, wasted on a blind dogma. We could improve this. We should improve this. Why destroy what you can perfect? One of his own men, a young Astartes named Tyrus, approached him. Sergeant, the enemy is regrouping. We must advance. In a blur of motion, Kesso backhanded Tyrus with the Alpha's severed head. The blow wasn't deadly, but it was savage, unexpected. Tyrus crashed into a pipeline, denting the metal. Kesso stood, dropping the head, his eyes wide not with anger, but with a kind of feverish epiphany. You are regrouping, Kesso hissed. his voice layered with a grating, subharmonic buzz that hadn't been there before. You are thinking like the enemy, linear, predictable. We must not advance. We must adapt. He looked at his power fist, dripping with oil and coolant. This is a crude tool I need. Precision. He turned and marched away from the Generatorum, towards the deeper, darker forges where the most esoteric weapons were rumored to be crafted. He was abandoning the objective, chasing a whisper in his own mind. I ordered Tyrus and the others to follow the main assault. I went after Queso. I found him an hour later in a sub-basement sanctum. He had found what he was looking for. A Medusan archaeovault, sealed since the age of strife. He hadn't blown it open. He had convinced it. The vault door was parted like a flower, its machine spirit silent. Inside, on a pedestal of black crystal, floated a device. It looked like a surgeon's toolset made by a mad god. Glittering silver scalpels, forceps, bone saws, and injectors, all orbiting a central, pulsing purple gem. It hummed with a sound that made my teeth ache. Queso was reaching for it. "Don't," I said, my bolter raised. "Not at him. At the device. That's not technology. That's a relic. It's warp touch." He turned, and for a second I saw my old sergeant, my brother. A flicker of doubt, of humanity. "It's a path to perfection, Varlok. The ultimate surgery. To cut away not flesh, but fate itself. The Warmaster seeks to cut out the cancer of the Imperium. This could let me cut out the very concept of weakness. It's a trap, Queso. Look at what you've already done. You struck Tyrus. You abandoned the mission. That thing is already changing you." He smiled, a terrible, gentle smile. "Change is the point, brother. Stagnation is death. The Emperor stagnated. Look where it got him." His fingers closed around the central gem. What happened next defies language. There was no explosion of light. Instead, the light in the room dimmed, sucked into the gem. Queso didn't scream. He unfolded. His armor didn't break. It became fluid, silver and organic, swallowing him. The surgical tools orbiting the gem shot forward, not into his hands, but into him, piercing his body at precise points. He didn't bleed. He crystallized. Where each tool entered, his flesh transformed into a lattice of purple crystal and polished bone. His eyes became twin voids, pits into the warp. He turned his new, horrific form towards me. The voice that came out was a symphony of scraping crystal and whispered agony. I see it now. The anatomy of lies. The skeleton of faith. Let me show you. Let me perform a dissection. Starting with your loyalty, he moved. Not with the thunderous speed of an Astartes, but with the silent, inevitable glide of a shadow. I fired. My bolter shells struck the crystal lattice on his chest and detonated harmlessly, absorbed into shimmering ripples across his form. A tendril of crystalline scalpels lashed out from his wrist. I dodged, but it wasn't aiming to kill. It nicked my paw. Where the ceramite was scratched, a cold, numbing fire spread, not burning, but unmaking. The molecular bonds were coming apart. I could see the individual layers of plasteel and ceramite separating like rotten leaves. I ran, not out of cowardice, but out of the primal understanding that I was not facing Queso anymore. I was facing the pure, refined essence of the path we had chosen. The pursuit of perfection, of cutting away imperfections, had culminated in this, a being whose only purpose was to dismantle reality itself into its component parts. Kesso had become the ultimate surgeon, and the entire universe was his diseased patient. I barely made it out, sealing the vault door behind me with a melter charge. The last thing I heard was not a roar of frustration, but a sigh of infinite, patient disappointment. The procedure is merely postponed. I reported Kesso lost in action. A victim of our... It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that the heresy wasn't just corrupting our morals. It was corrupting the laws of physics around us. We weren't just becoming traitors. We were becoming impossibilities. That was the true horror of the Great Wars. It wasn't the scale, the billions dying, the planets burning. It was the unraveling. The iron hands on Isstvan, fighting with the cold logic of machines, only to be betrayed by the very concept of brotherhood. The Death Guard, enduring any hardship, only to have their resilience turned into a curse of unending, toxic decay. The thousand suns, seeking infinite knowledge, only to have their minds and bodies turned to dust. And us, the Sons of Horus, seeking to correct a father's mistake, only to become the vessel for a darkness that wanted to unmake all fathers. All mistakes, all of creation. We thought we were fighting a civil war. We were actually manning the barricades during the end of reason. Every battle was a lesson in the new, terrible rules of a universe where the only constant was betrayal, betrayal of oaths, of flesh, of reality itself. I fought through it all, a ghost in a sea-green shell. The laughter of the blood gods' devotees on the killing fields, the sensuous, soul-flaying art of the Emperor's children, the despair that rolled off the Death Guard in palpable, physical waves. And through it all, the figure of Horus Lupercal, once our luminous sun, becoming a black hole, drawing all light, all loyalty, all sanity into his event horizon. By the time we reached the Sol system, I was already dead. The man who had stood guard at the Warmaster's door was gone, dissected by 1,000 small cuts of conscience. What remained was a hollow instrument, waiting for the final blow. It never came. Instead, I chose the void. The cold, silent, empty void. It was the only thing left that hadn't been corrupted. The only truth that hadn't been turned into a lie. So now I tend the engines. The heat is penance. The roar is absolution. I left the war, but the war never left me. It just changed form. It's in the way my hands sometimes shake when they're idle. It's in the nightmare of Kesso's crystal form, offering to dissect my soul. It's in the permanent, frozen scream of the galaxy I helped break. The heresy's beginning wasn't on Davin, it wasn't. In the temple of the Serpent Lodge. It was in the moment a soldier like me. A good soldier was given a bad order and decided that loyalty to a man was higher than loyalty to what's right. Every war after that was just a consequence, a symptom of the disease, and I am a carrier. I live with the infection every day. I work the engines, and I remember. That's my sentence. To remember all of it. The first, clean cut, and the 10,000 that flayed me alive.